one of the most requested questions that I've gotten since I started my channel. And it makes sense, right? Because I talk about becoming a lawyer in Canada, and a lot of people want to know, how do you actually come to Canada? Well, you can do this process, but how do you actually figure out your immigration status in Canada? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about different programs that may be available to you as a foreign trained lawyer. But please note that anything that I say today should not be considered as legal advice. I'm only going to be talking about general programs or general scenarios. If you are interested in Canadian immigration as a foreign lawyer, I would be happy to assist you at the firm that I'm at. I'm going to put my contacts in the description box below, the firm that I'm at, and how you can contact me. But let's get into it. First and foremost, I wanted to clarify that the lawyer licensing process is completely separate from your immigration process. Some programs may benefit your immigration status in Canada, but generally speaking, the process on its own does not really help you in getting Canadian immigration. Some programs may, but I'm going to talk about it in a little bit more detail. But before you watch this, just understand that the immigration process is completely different than the lawyer licensing process. So let's start with the process and see how it can or cannot benefit you for your immigration requirements. The first step is you have to write the NCA exams. Now, if you apply for an assessment and you're writing the NCA exams, there is no immigration benefit. You don't get a specific visa, you don't get a study permit, or you don't get a work permit based on the fact that you're writing the NCA exams. So anything that you do, if you want to come to Canada, it has to be on your own. The NCA exams will not benefit you. You can write these exams online as well. Actually, the exams are online now. So you can be in Canada, or you can also be in your hometown writing these exams. So it doesn't really benefit your immigration status in any way. So just keep that in mind. If you have been assigned NCA exams and you decide to study at a Canadian law school, so for example, if you decide to do the LLM, that can potentially benefit you in your Canadian immigration, goals. So for example, if you do come to Canada and you decide to do the LLM, you will likely get a study permit. So you will have to apply for a study permit. Once you complete the LLM program, depending on the length of your study, you may qualify for a post-graduation work permit. Now, once you get your post-graduation work permit, and let's just say that you're articling or you're working in Canada, you can then accumulate some points for Canadian experience. Once you do that, you may qualify for what we call a Canadian Experience Class Permanent Residency. Now, this is an expensive process because first you're going to be paying tuition fees for the LLM, and then you're immigrating to Canada as well. So this process, let's just say you do the LLM, you will get a study permit. Then you will be allowed to work in Canada on a post-graduation work permit. And depending on your background, you may qualify for express entry permanent residency. So if you decide to study, this will eventually benefit your Canadian immigration goals. If you're just doing the NCA exams on your own, you may not qualify for the Canadian Experience Class program. So just to summarize, again, one last time, it can be a bit confusing. So if you write the NCA exams on your own, it doesn't benefit your immigration as such. If you decide to go to a Canadian law school, it will benefit your Canadian immigration goals. Now, moving on to the law practice program. So I've talked about this a lot in my previous videos. All lawyers, foreign trained lawyers, or anyone who wants to become a lawyer in Canada has to complete an experiential training component, which could either be articling or the law practice program. Articling is when you work with a Canadian lawyer and you get that experience. In order to article, you need a work permit. Employers generally, some employers may help you in getting a work permit. Generally speaking, it's quite hard. I have not seen a lot of law firms doing that, but some law firms will help you get a work permit. But generally speaking, it's really hard to do that. On the other hand, if you do the law practice program, the law practice program will not get you a study permit or a work permit. You must have that before you enroll yourself into this program. So it doesn't also benefit your immigration goals as such. So these are all these programs that you have to do in order to become a lawyer in Canada, but a lot of them don't really help you get a permit or permanent residency as such. So what does that mean? That means that my recommendation, and also generally just to be on the safer end, it's a good idea to figure out Canadian immigration on your own, just to make sure that you don't run into these issues later on. Relying on an employer to sponsor your work permit can be hard. Studying in Canada, if you want to do the LLM, can be expensive. Again, there are options with the LLM that you get a study permit and then you get a post-graduation work permit. I know of friends who've done that. I feel like I'm speaking too fast because I'm really passionate about this topic, but anyways. So what is it that you can do in order to help you reach your immigration goals? Now, if you are a professional, meaning if you're a lawyer in your home country, and you're, I don't know, 30 years old, in your late 20s, early 30s, you are licensed to practice in your hometown, you may have a master's degree and your English is good, and you've been working in your hometown for about 3 years or more, you may qualify. And again, it depends on your personal situation. I don't know if you will, but you may qualify for permanent residency through the Federal Skilled Worker Program. It's a different type of permanent residency application, meaning people who have foreign work experience and have education. Express entry is a points-based system in Canada. So the reason why I say that, you need to have good English, or you have a master's degree, or you have 3 years of work experience, is because you'll get points for that. So my suggestion and my recommendation is, is to figure out your immigration through that program if you are eligible or not. Just because before you come to Canada, if you become a permanent resident, one, you don't have to worry about employers sponsoring you or not. You are able to get more jobs because, you have status in Canada. And lastly, the most important thing is that you don't pay international fees as a student. International fees can be very expensive, and if you are a permanent resident before you come to Canada, you're going to be paying half the fee that you would have if you came here on a study permit. Again, not to say one is better than the other, you're free to choose, but just I'm giving you an idea of what this looks like. So the Federal Skilled Worker Program is a good program for professionals. If you're a lawyer and you have the education, you have a master's degree, and you're around that age that I mentioned, you should be able to apply through the Express Entry system. If you need any help or if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them at my firm. Again, like I said, I put my details in the description box below. But this way, you're able to, it'll give you more peace because you're not relying on anyone else for your immigration needs. So if you qualify, my recommendation is to look into it right away because immigration is a big part of becoming a lawyer in Canada. Sometimes you may not have enough points for the Express Entry Federal Skilled Worker Program. Really depends on your situation. And, if you want to get your situation assessed, you should definitely speak to somebody who is a lawyer and who has the experience. Now, if you don't have enough points, sometimes it is a good idea to see if you're able to get a job in Canada and see if an employer would be willing to, maybe apply for a work permit for you. If you are from a country with which Canada has a free trade agreement. So for example, the United States, Mexico, Colombia, the list, there are other countries too, which I can't go over right now, but just letting you know, if you're from a country like the United States or Mexico or Colombia, like I said, getting a work permit may be easier because you may qualify for an LMIA exempt permit. Now, there are different requirements. Some occupations are covered, some occupations are not covered. You need to have a certain amount of work experience to qualify for this type of permit. You also need to have certain education to qualify for this type of permit. So highly recommend, if you are from a country where Canada has a free trade agreement, you can also look into this option where an employer may be able to help you get your work permit. And if they do, that may give you extra points on permanent residency through the express entry system. So just to summarize, I talked about a few different things. I did not go into too much detail about each of the programs just because everyone's situation is different and I can't advise on your situation personally, but I would be happy to do it if you are interested in speaking with me. But just to summarize, I know I spoke a lot and maybe I spoke too fast, but just to summarize, the lawyer licensing process and immigration, two different things. However, you have to figure out immigration on your own, just because it is less expensive that way and it will give you a peace of mind. And employers, if you don't have to worry about your immigration status in Canada, you have more opportunities, just because employers don't have to worry about you having legal authorization to work in Canada. Now, you can come to Canada on a study permit through the LLM and then work your way up, which is through the Express Entry System Canadian Experience Class Permit Residency. That can be expensive. If you don't want to do that, then the Federal Skilled Worker Program is something that you want to look into. If you have, like I said, if you have, if you're in that range, 29 to 32, or maybe a little bit older, you have a master's degree and your language test scores are great, you may qualify under that program. And then before you move to Canada, you're already a permanent resident. In my situation, I moved to Canada as a Canadian permanent resident, and it was a lot easier for me in the sense that I didn't have to worry about immigration requirements. As an immigration lawyer, I work with many students and I work with people who are looking to get permanent residency, and I can see how stressful it can be just because of the timelines. And so if you are eligible for the Federal Skilled Worker Program, and that will depend on your background, you should look into it and see if you can sort of move to Canada on your own like that. And lastly, if you're able to get a job in Canada and an employer is willing to do the work to get you your work permit, then of course that will also benefit you in your Canadian immigration goals, especially if you're from a country with which Canada has a foreign trade agreement. That may be helpful in your situation. Thank you for watching. I hope that this was helpful. As a Canadian immigration lawyer myself, I can understand how stressful it can be, especially as a student, when you're coming in as a student and sort of figuring out when you're going to become a permanent resident. So of course, I'm happy to help. I will put my details in the description box below. And if you need any assistance, feel free to get in touch with me. Thank you.